We're here to talk about love stories. We're going to be opening next weekend, and we want to take a moment to share what this process has been like for us, why we chose this material, why now, as we get ready to share it with all of you, our audience that'll be coming to see the show. My name is Mauricio Salgado, and I'm the director of this piece. Let's go around and introduce ourselves, yeah?
Hi, I'm Alexa. I'm in the ensemble. I'm Freya. I'm also in the ensemble.
I'm Christian, and I am the head writer. It started off initially for me in like a very personal place in terms of I feel like a lot of people around me had these types of questions, and what I wanted to do, I think, was explore how like it felt like me and my group of friends and everybody I would talk to that we'd get to that point, they had like a really kind of a lot of questions about the way that the dating world works now and a lot of insecurity, and started me with a question of like, how big does this go? Like, where does it go all the way to the top, essentially? And so it started out at this point of curiosity and need, and then I discovered that there is this sort of level where there's a trend for this generation to date less and be lonely, or there's all these new sort of trends that are happening right now that are like nationwide, essentially. And that I felt like that was something that made it even more prescient, I suppose.
Yeah, and this started for you, if I remember the timeline correctly, about a year ago, right?
Over a year ago, yeah. Winter break of my junior year. I'm a senior now.
Nice.
So yeah, this was over a year, close to a year and a half now.
Right. And so then you pitched it to the department gave you the okay to land it as a devised piece, and then you started interviewing people, recruiting people, right? Is that how that worked?
Yeah, I felt like I was deeply underinformed. So what I started doing immediately was just interviewing people about their experiences, people who I thought from like different walks of life, people with Greek life, people different races, backgrounds, orientations, just to feel like I understood what their dating experience was. And it was kind of miraculous because there seemed to be still the same level of lack of knowledge and lack of sureness, no matter how big I reached out. Reached out and tried to talk to a bunch of different types of people, and
right.
So that was something that was a really interesting phenomenon for me. That a lot of those interviews essentially mounted to research, and it was really cool hearing people's stories and understanding the types of stories that people sort of went through. And then, yeah, I was also recruiting the whole time, especially people had like a cool interview. I was like, hey, you're an artist, join us.
Come be in the show.
Come be in the show.
So Freya and Alexa, why this? I mean, what was the moment when Christian, or how'd you hear about it, that you were like, I gotta do this. This topic matters to me. Why love stories now?
I think that it's a topic that we don't really talk about, especially at Santa Clara. I feel like we have a lot of assumptions about what other people are doing in terms of dating. But then this play really kind of cracks it open and says, yeah, nobody really knows what they're doing, and we all just need to say it. And so I really resonated with that message of the story, and I knew that in my last quarter as an undergraduate, I wanted to do something that was more collaborative, less classical. Romeo and Juliet's very classical, so I wanted to kind of lean in the other direction with people who I love and people who I think are really great creatives, so it all kind of just blended together.
Right.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I wanted to be a part of promoting like younger voices in theater, as well as we don't get to do a lot of devising in lots of theater programs around the country.
Mm-hmm.
We're pretty unique in that way that we've put an emphasis towards that in certain projects, including this one. And I was intrigued by like what Christian said of seeing what was happening around me in terms of people at Santa Clara and their attitudes towards love, sex, and relationships.
Right. Devising. You dropped in the word devising.
Yes.
Who knows how many people out there know what that means?
Right.
Will you give us a definition for this process? Like what was this process and how would that mean, devising?
Yeah, the way that I explain it to people is that generally the people that you're seeing in the performance are the people that helped create that performance. So obviously you won't see Christian on stage, most likely, I don't think.
No, not.
No.
So, but I mean, obviously he's a big part. So that rule isn't always the case, but in general, the people that you see performing are the ones that kind of put it together. So it's been an extra long rehearsal process because we had to start with nothing and then end with something. So
Right.
that's the easiest way I can say it.
Yeah, we started with a 10-week class where we brought up ideas that people had, stories that had been explored in the interviews and had not been. And we played in improv games, in writing our own monologues, in presenting scenes for each other, and just recording and transcribing those scenes. And that's how we initially started to come up with content. And that's changed a lot over time. Some of it stayed the same. We have acting, we have singing, we have dance. It's not just a play. It's a sort of a performance piece.
Right. And if maybe, Christian, if you could say from the beginning your question around love stories, how has, now that we're about to share this with the audience, how has it changed? Like, what's new for you now as you're thinking about it?
It's so different than I think I originally planned on being. I think I planned to have a lot of the stories a little bit more based around the interviews that we took. And then what happened was we got everybody into the room, and that kind of went out the window. I mean, there's a level where that seems to be the way this process works. So so much of the stuff I kind of came in with changed or evolved in a different way, and just kind of have to go with it. But at the end of the day, I think it did end up going back to where I had initially hoped it would go, which was this idea of sort of getting at a bigger understanding of what it's like to kind of date at this campus, and maybe a little bit into some of the fears and the struggles that we get into, and just kind of creating a piece that people hopefully can find themselves in.
Right.
And so I think it sort of did an interesting loop back around, in which it was like, oh, things are changing. Okay, cool. We have new voices. We came into, I didn't know if we'd have a cast of 5 people or a class of 50. So we didn't know it was going to happen. We ended up with 13 now at the end.
Yeah.
13 now at the end, which is, that's a pretty big group, and so it was one of those things that I always kept trying to keep it open and just kind of went with the flow a lot. So it's changed a lot since I initially started, but I'm really happy with the result.
You mentioned struggles, and I know for myself, I'm of a different generation, and yet I also recognize the struggles that you all are talking about. So I know anybody who's going to come see this, whether it be of generation of students here on campus right now or folks who are older or younger, are going to find themselves also feeling some similarities, recognizing themselves. What are some of the struggles that you would say, so that folks know, like, yeah, these are the things we're struggling with on stage? What are some of those struggles?
I think dating in the digital age is the subtitle for a lot of this, and so it's a lot of comparing yourself to people you see online and other relationships you see around you, and the added pressure of adding social media to dealing with those relationships.
Right.
That's a big one.
Yeah, like the age-old question of why am I afraid to ask someone out? That's kind of more of a classic one, but with the digital twist, I guess.
It's just interesting as well because there's so many of the classic questions bleed into like these new sort of phenomena that we have now, where I think something that was sort of important with the idea of the digital age was kind of not blaming everything on technology, which I feel so many things nowadays that address this topic do. Like technology is ruining us, and kind of trying to complicate that a little bit more and see where are the things that have sort of always been problems, where are new norms that come from other perspectives kind of fitting in, where do they intersect perhaps, and so kind of trying to make that idea of how technology plays a role in our lives a little bit more complicated than just kind of ruining it.
Right.
So I think that was something that was important, but there is a struggle there that's pretty palpable.
Yeah, I recognize struggles with loneliness, struggles with depression, recognize struggles with misogyny and sexual harassment, all of those things both present in the rehearsal room and finding their ways on the stage as well. If you could, for the audience, last thought, what would you say this play is about? Or what's like a line in the play that you're like, oh, that line, this piece can be encapsulated in that line or that moment or that bit of tension between those two characters. I think that's where this is at.
I'm trying to think without spoiling too much which one to do.
Well, there's a movement thread throughout the piece that is kind of one of the longer arcs that we have in the show that I think, because of its length, it's able to have a lot of nuance. So look out for that movement arc. You'll know it when you see it. But it's very comprehensive in terms of addressing the struggles of relationships and also the joys.
Or maybe another way to frame it is, over the course of this process, is there something that keeps coming back that you're like, oh yeah, we keep doing that, and that's what's going to make this thing good. Like that's what's.
I think there's something in which there's this like little interchange that happens when where someone who feels unlovable, they ask the question to someone that's close to them, like, am I unlovable? And the person gives them the answer that everyone knows, which is like, no one is unlovable. And then they respond with, I know that, but I don't believe that. Can you change my mind, please?
Right.
And I think that's something that we wrestle with a lot, because I think there's a lot of platitudes that, especially our generation, we get hit with platitudes, just overloaded with them. I feel like I see Facebook videos on my feed all the time about like making these big sweeping statements about love in our generation all the time. And so, but that idea of being able to like, that struggle of hearing all this information, even if we agree with it or not, and being able to internalize it, I think that's something that's really important in this generation, the way we're overloaded by information and all these ideas that get thrown at us. And like, you know, how do we actually take the ones that we need and take them to heart?
Yeah.
I think that's something that's important.
I thought of one. There's a character that gets to a very, very low point, and it ends in her saying, I'm broken. And I think that's a question that we've been fielding a lot, is why do I feel like this? Like, are we broken? Are we past the point of repair? Like, is our society in this space where nothing's going to get better, it's just going to get worse? And eventually, in the end, we see some hope in community and people sharing their experiences and reminding each other that we all go through things that are extremely difficult, and through leaning on each other and showing each other that we are loved and we are cared about, that we can be okay.
There's also some really funny points in the
There's
show.
also some really funny stuff.
Yeah.
Because dating is hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, that I feel like yes to everything you said, and I find the show really funny.
Yeah.
I spend a good majority of the time laughing or intrigued, also befuddled by some of the things
Yeah.
that folks are talking about, but all of that keeps me engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So it moves pretty quickly, 80 minutes, tightly moving along. So I'm really excited to see, and we've got a couple more days to keep tightening it up. And I think it's going to be a great show for everybody who's coming May 10th through May 18th.